Mr. John Sherwin, how are you today?
I am doing well.
I appreciate you coming out and hanging out with us. John, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe what you've been doing over the last couple of years?
Okay. So I am a little bit English, which you can probably tell from my voice.
Yep.
But I'm not all English. I am actually, I think, culturally quite American at this point.
You're 50% English, 50% American. Is that fair?
50-50 by genetics. But in terms of cultural influence, I think it's probably not an even split. I think it's been slowly shifting over the years. I've been in the States now 9 years since I was born. So, well, I spent some time in England. I then came back to the States, my homeland originally, and it's been 9 years. So my accent has slowly shifted, and I would say I'm more and more gaining American cultural power, if you like. But I grew up in a household with an American dad, and it was always present, and I wanted to be here to experience more of it, I suppose. Yeah, well, I mean, so to answer the question more directly and not speak in riddles, after university, well, even before university, I knew that I wanted to work in some entrepreneurial endeavor, whether that was my own or something else. I wasn't sure, but I would say I didn't know it then, but now I consider myself a builder. And I like the term builder. I think maybe it's a bit cliche at this point if you spend much time on Twitter, but building things is fun. And the attitude of folks in the States generally lends itself towards positivity and possibility. Whereas in the UK, maybe a little less so. Like, I don't want to be too generalist with the statement, but certainly there feels like, I think what we call it, tall poppy syndrome, where if you stand out or stick out in some way, you get chopped down. Whereas in the States, I like to use the example of you do you is an American phrase that I love dearly because it embraces the weirdness. And that's something that I found a little bit less in evidence in the UK.
So I know you went to Oxford, but you were born in the United States and you spent, only a couple of years here in the United States before you moved back to England, yeah?
Yeah, a little more than a couple, but not enough to really get the accent, shall we say.
And you said to me that you wanted to come to the United States for college. You didn't specifically say that you wanted to go to like Harvard or Yale, but I kind of inferred that those were some of the things on your list. And you kind of joked to me, well, I decided on Oxford because they didn't, have room for me. But I think Oxford's, pretty decent by all accounts.
Yeah, I did okay on that. So yeah, I think, in hindsight, my father in particular, who's American, really would talk about the American brands of universities around the dinner table growing up. So, you have to picture this. We're in a small town in England, far, far away from Harvard, Yale, Stanford, all that stuff. And for some reason, because he didn't go to any of those schools, but for some reason he would always like hold them up as the thing to aspire to. And so I'm sure that was internalized by myself and my siblings along the way. And it got to the end of school in the UK and I had to decide, okay, like I want to go to university. And I think the US system would have been best for me because it allows you 2 years of generalism and then you specialize after that. So, but the UK system, in contrast, you basically pick one thing and you just do that for 3 to 4 years, depending on the degree. So I wanted to go to the US, but I only wanted to go if it was a top school because I'd had this, branding schooled into me. And also because college in the US is very expensive. And so, I think back then, so this would have been around 2009, 2010.
Yeah, that was the same year that I went to school.
Yeah. So I think, I don't know, 50, 60 grand a year tuition. I don't remember the numbers because I never got in, but like I think that's roughly what we would have been looking at. In contrast, at that time, a year of tuition at any university in the UK was around £3,500.
Crazy.
Yeah. So, I got rejected from these American schools. I was putting field hockey on my applications because I played that in the UK. And I thought it would make me a quirky applicant.
You're not quite making things up, but you're stretching.
Well, I thought maybe they'll be into the fact that I'm just like a little different.
Yeah, you're a little diverse,
But they clearly were not. And then so I got into Oxford to study biology. Biology was the thing. In hindsight, it sounds so dumb. But I picked the subject that I could do for 3 years without getting bored. And that was biology. Because again, you had to pick one thing.
Yeah, you had to do one thing. You couldn't just get in and be like, oh, I'm undecided.
Not a possibility. So I did it, and whether it was the right move or not from an academic standpoint, I don't know. I have no regrets. I had a great time. It was a really fun period of life. Worked very hard. Anyone who tells you, well, there are some subjects that didn't work that hard. I guess biology was maybe one of the easier subjects actually, but it's still, it was a lot of work. But left that feeling educated and ready to, chase something.
It's kind of funny that, did you ever consider going into business? Is that a thing at Oxford?
Yes. Well, not business on its own. I think they had something called economics and management. I want to say, I think I had a friend who did that.
Sounds like a very English thing. We don't have business. We have economics.
Yeah. The way there was that, and then there was this other one called politics, philosophy, and economics. And that's where like almost all of the prime ministers that get pumped out of Oxford do PPE, or like there's some stat where so many of them studied that. And I had a number of friends who did that. I think it was like quite a good, well-rounded option. So kind of flies in the face of you have to pick one thing.
Right.
But you couldn't have like different combos. It was PPE or economics and management. Those, I don't know that I would have gotten in for those. And I also don't think I had curiosity to study them in an academic manner. I think part of that comes from this maybe American sort of, not an American upbringing, but American influence that I've had over the years, where it's like, there is no gatekeeping to business. You can just do it if you want to. You don't need to have a degree in economics and management. And biotech remains really interesting to me. Science is sort of a core theme in my career, remains that way, and I hope it will stay that way because it's something I'm truly passionate about. So yeah, I mean, it was tough to study just one thing, but it was absolutely rewarding, and I have no regrets about that path.
I want to skip forward. We'll go back to what happens post school, because I know there's Silicon Valley and there's some startup stuff there. But over the last couple of years, you've been working on Hydrant, and you just want to give us maybe a little bit about Hydrant, the brand, the company, the products.
Sure. So I had the idea for Hydrant in October 2016. I basically had always struggled with hydration around hangover specifically at university. And I saw these medical students drinking this very clinical packaged hydration powder after nights out drinking. And it was a big part of the culture to go out drinking a number of nights a week.
But also, you can drink at age 18.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And so it's like super ingrained, it's the done thing. And I saw these medical students doing this. I didn't know anything about hydration at that point. I was studying biology, and I like to say the degree was like a degree in critiquing academic research. Like you could read a paper and very quickly say, well, this paper's actually not that good, and here's 10 reasons why. So I saw these students doing it. I tried it on myself first, like all good scientists. Tested out. Disgusting product. I mean, gag-inducing, made me want to puke.
Was it just like loaded with sodium?
Yes. Yeah. Ton of sodium, but incredibly functional. And I will never forget that first morning after I took it, being like, oh my gosh, this works.
Right.
And I had also tested just drinking loads of water. And I would sort of come home after a night out, smugly drink 3 English pints of water before bed, thinking I'm going to wake up feeling so much better than all my housemates. And I felt worse. And I just couldn't understand it. So that kind of like piqued my interest in why does this one thing work with less water when, chugging 3 pints is making me feel terrible. And I would get cramps during the night. So then I learned all of this science around electrolytes and hydration, which I think now is a lot of people know about.
Mm-hmm.
But back then, it really was not mainstream or particularly known. Fast forward a couple of years, I've left university. I've gone into Silicon Valley, work at a tech company. I've seen the rise of direct consumer startups on the East Coast. Well, it was kind of in the US as a whole, but New York was a bit of a hub. I had family there. My brother actually was working on an e-commerce business on the East Coast himself. And I'm sitting in an office as an employee in Silicon Valley at a company that was not experiencing a ton of growth. And I'm chatting with my brother who's experiencing a ton of growth, thinking, hang on, what am I doing? Like, I really just want to learn faster. And there was a clear ceiling for me at that company, largely because it was not growing that quickly. And so I quit my job and packed up my apartment, went back to New York, and I did not know that I wanted to start Hydrant immediately. That idea came to me after, I think it was about 8 months. And then I realized, like, well, no one is really solving this problem today. I still have this problem. I would scour the internet and supermarket shelves for a very effective hydration mix. So high in electrolytes, low in sugar, but some sugar present, no artificial colors, flavor, sweeteners, and taste good. Didn't exist. So I figured, well, how hard can it be? And that is the story of how I started Hydrant. And now it's been, I guess, nearly 7 years. And initially it was just me on my own. I did an Indiegogo to raise some money to get it going. And then we raised a bunch of money, went off to the races, and we've had a whole roller coaster. Cliche.
I was struck by how kind of fascinated you were with hydration. Like, obviously, I know Hydrant, and I've known you for a little bit of time, but I guess if you would have said, Alex, what do you think the founding story of Hydrant is? I would say, I think John probably saw an opportunity in the marketplace and said, that's a good one, let's go for that. But that is not your story. You legitimately were like fascinated and sort of obsessed. You told me you had bought all these different products, different brands. You went UK, you went US, you bought them all. You went to every gas station, grocery store, and you tried a little bit of everything. And I was just maybe not shocked to hear that, but I thought it to be super interesting that you actually have passion behind this idea and this product, which I think is maybe not the most common thing in the world for people. You come out of Silicon Valley and you go, yeah, I'm going to start a brand. What is the opportunity? I don't know. Let's just slam forward whatever seems like it's going to work. But that wasn't quite the case for you.
Not at all, no. And I, to this day, I'm not sure whether that's an advantage or a disadvantage. I think the advantage was our product worked. Still works to this day. I'm very proud of every product that we put out. The disadvantage is I am sort of ideological about the products. So I'll give you a very good example of one of the things that we were slow to change that I think was probably a mistake. So within hydration, the presence of sugar speeds up the process of hydration just a little bit. We don't have to get into the nitty-gritty of it, but a little bit is good, a lot is bad, unless you're running marathons or you need the carbs. Zero is not as good as a little bit when it comes to hydration speed. And so we made this product. It was pretty low sugar. I think at the time we had maybe 4 or 5 grams, 5 at most grams of sugar per serving, which works out to 25-ish calories. It's just not much, or at least that's what I thought. And the feedback we got from people on our Facebook ads was like, sugar is the devil. You are the worst. Like, this product sucks. And I was just sitting there like, these people don't understand, and I'm going to go on a mission to educate them on how sugar is important in this process. Meanwhile, my then business partner, Jay, was kind of like, hey, we should probably make a zero sugar product. He was more the business side, saw the opportunity. I was like, hey man, why don't we do this? I'm like, but it doesn't work as well.
He just wanted to skip that middle step of educating. Just, hey man, let's just skip all that stuff.
Yeah. And I think now, and you know this, we have a zero sugar product now. I eventually, after, a year, or maybe it was even 18 months of like trying to fight the good fight, it was like, you got to give people what they want. Even after the education, they're like, I get it. The sugar does something, but I still want the zero sugar. And So yeah, in that sense, I think it was a little bit of a disadvantage. And I try and get out of my own way now on certain things. Like, even as I've mentioned to you a little bit about our product roadmap at the company, you can probably sense I'm a lot less precious. The science has to work. That remains a theme, but like I'm less precious about the sort of the specific philosophy of the product, if that makes sense. I'm confusing myself here.
No, I mean it makes so much sense, and we love the story about when the founder will not bend on their ideas, but we only love that story when it works, right? It's like we love it when it's Steve Jobs or it's like Elon Musk, like the visionary leader who just takes it all the way forward and like, oh, I can't make electric vehicles, watch this, and they just push it forward. But how many of those stories do you don't end up hearing because that founder is like, competing with the market, and they just won't accept this idea that, hey, your product, like, it's good, but it's not what people want,
Totally.
That's a really tough balancing act to know when, like, you do need to stick to your guns and when you do need to listen to the market.
Yeah. Yeah. And I still, that one was a turning point, I think, for the company. And I was like, oh, okay, we need to start thinking about where else are we making this same mistake. So for a long time, I had this belief in simplicity and function because, I was all about the function. We launched with one flavor and I was like, this is great. The product is incredible. It works so well. People are like, cool, what are you going to make next? I was like, well, what do you mean? What am I going to make? It works. Now we have to have like a bunch of different flavors. And I used to have one single word flavors. So lime, lemon. And to me, I was like, this is beautiful. The packaging is beautiful. It's so simple. It's so functional. And I know now a 2-word name is a cheat code. If you name your product, Fruit Blast, it's going to sell better than, fruit. That's a bad example.
I got one cheat code for you also when it comes to flavor. And we've done a variety of products in this flavor, and it always ends up being the best seller. Rainbow candy. If you name something rainbow candy, people go wild for it. I know you probably can't do that because you guys obviously don't have like the artificial sweeteners that we have in some of our products. But man, rainbow candy is a cheat code. If you sell a product under that name, it'll go. And yeah, it's funny that you say that, that simplicity. And I think I also heard you say that you almost initially thought like, well, people are going to buy it because it works. And no, don't worry if it's not the best tasting product on the market. You're like, that's fine. And eventually you were like, wow, I was way wrong about that. Because I think you and I both probably know it's all about taste when it comes to products that people are going to consume.
Yeah. It's a long, hard road. I think the other piece of it that's difficult for me is, I mean, I could talk about how I think the product was designed better for a European consumer. Right. And
that's one of my questions. I want to hear about the UK palate. I've heard you talk about that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's that. And there's also like, am I even the right, like, is designing a product that I like the right product for Americans? The average American? And I think wholeheartedly the answer is no at this point. And that's not in any way a dig on the average American. It's just saying like, I need to get out of my own way again. If people want rainbow candy, you make rainbow candy. And yeah, so I mean, like the European thing, when we were first making the product and formulating it, I was testing it on my friends, and we had a stick size. I would just give it to them with instructions like, hey, mix it in this many ounces of water, milliliters of water. And invariably, they would completely ignore the instructions, and they would grab whatever implement was in their cupboard.
Yep.
If you live in Europe, the implement, at least at this time, it was like before reusable bottles were a huge thing. It was a glass, and it would be either a low ball or a high ball, but it was certainly not 16 ounces. And so they would try it, and they'd be like, this is way too flavorful. It's disgusting.
Whoa.
You need to tone this down.
Interesting.
And we would go through various iterations. And I did test it on some Americans as well. But I think I probably had too many people in the mix from the UK. And ultimately, we went for like a less flavorful, less sweet formula designed for less water. And in the long run, I think that has played out to be a disadvantage for us in this market. Sadly, we never launched in the UK, but I think that could have been a different story.
Hey, it's not too late, man. Yeah, I heard you use the term many times over. Your flavor was subtle. You know, it was the subtle flavor, like a subtle hint of X, Y, Z. And yeah, I mean, obviously, a lot of the other products that you and I have both probably consumed that are US based, I mean, the flavor is just like a punch in the face. Like we sell some products that I'm like, this is way too sweet for me. Like this is just way too much for me, but people love it. And that rainbow candy just like hits for them. And so it's like, okay, if you're going to buy rainbow candy, like, you know, you probably want it to be sweet. You don't want a subtle rainbow candy taste.
It's hard. I mean, also just getting to this point of you can't please everyone, you know, and
yes.
that it's hard when you're early on your startup journey as a first time founder and you get feedback from people on ads and reviews saying like, oh my God, I can't believe you picked this ingredient, or, oh, it tastes this way or that way. Finding signal in that noise and figuring out who you're actually building for is the most important thing you can do. And we were so broad on our target audience because we didn't really know, to be honest. And I think, again, you know, I look at some of the other brands in our space who maybe it didn't even exist when I got started, who had a much tighter customer demographic or target customer. They were like, hey, we're building specifically for people who have this goal. And some of those decisions around taste, around ingredients were so much easier because they weren't trying to please everyone. And, you know, if I were to go back to the beginning and redo things, I would be so much tighter on that audience because everything else gets easier.
Yeah. And specifically when it comes to flavor, I know you've told me that you had kind of flavor variation 1, which was a little bit more subtle. And then you went to a 2.0, if you will, new flavor, more flavoring. And what do people say? Some of them want the old version, right? So it's just like, gosh, you know? So like, how do you even think about that? Because as you just stated, you can't make everyone happy, but you want to make some people happy. You want to have people appreciate and like your product. But at the end of the day, there's some customers like, hey, dude, this product just ain't for you, you know?
I think it depends on your lens. And I think the lens of a seasoned venture capitalist who's seen businesses go from, you know, $0 in revenue to hundreds of millions, even billions in revenue, is you think that your existing customers are the most important customers you'll ever have. But what you don't know is that the next 10 million in revenue is coming from a completely different group of people. You just haven't figured out what that product or who those people are yet. I'm not saying I agree with that. That's one lens that I have had explained to me by, you know, people who I trust and respect. The other lens is, well, hang on, you know, the earliest adopters are your most valuable people. They took the risk. They are interested in what you're selling. And if you can just keep building for them and keep making them happy, over time, more people are going to flock to the cause, to the mission, and join up. So different ways of looking at the problem. And I still don't know which one is right. I think it depends on, you know, have you raised a bunch of money and are you trying to get big really fast? Or do you have a lot of time to build intentionally and really make those early customers your champions? I think if I were doing it all again, I certainly would be focused on the early customers more and just spending loads and loads of time honing in on what exactly are we building and for who exactly. Because you can saturate that group and then you can figure out the next group. If you try and boil the ocean, as they say,
boil the ocean.
It
Never
leads,
heard that one.
Yeah, it leads to some difficulties. Yeah.
So then take me back to sort of as Hydrant is being founded, because I know the fundraising part of Hydrant is a big part of the story. It's a big part of why people have maybe seen the brand and heard about it. Because today, if you wanted to start a hydration brand with no money, no capital under you, I mean, I think that it would be quite difficult just given where the space is. So talk to me about, as the business is starting, you said you do that little Kickstarter. Maybe just take me through that whole process, because I know you've talked about sampling products and things like that. Just give us a timeline of how that works up until the date of like, boom, we got funding, we're ready to rock and roll.
Sure. So I'm still to this day a little bit embarrassed at how long getting started took me. And I wish I could go back in time and shorten that period of time, because I did the classic mistake of trying to perfect a product way beyond what it needed to be and waiting to just get feedback from real customers. Because let me tell you, even though I perfected the product, we had to very quickly reformulate the first version. Okay, so idea was like October 2016, incorporated in January 2017. I took some of my savings, which were meager, a little bit of friends and family money, and then raised an Indiegogo for the first production run.
That's like a Kickstarter-esque.
Yes. I can't remember why we didn't do Kickstarter. There was a good reason for it at the time, but they're effectively the same thing. And the Indiegogo ran December of 2017. So it took me a full year to get to even just like raising that production run money. But when I did that, by then I had a visual brand, I had a finished formula and product. I wasn't yet sure my stick size or pack size, but could figure that out later.
And you're doing this all solo, basically.
At this point, it's solo. I did have a marketing agency help me with the Indiegogo and the website at that point. I came from software. It was not like consumer websites or anything interesting like that. So I hired them, and that was where some of that original sort of seed cash went. I shouldn't use the word seed because we raised a seed round later, but that little chunk of money initially was branding, formulation, and getting the sort of first marketing engine up and running. Then the Indiegogo money, which I think ended up being $17,000, $17,500, something like that. Not bad, but it was not great. It basically covered the first production run. But to give you an example of how far we've come, that first production run, I couldn't afford to have the co-packer pack the sticks into the boxes. I bought the boxes only in China because it was extremely cheap. Shipped those to a WeWork in New York. I bought the individual sticks, although they were sort of sachets at that time, in California, had them filled over there. So it was actually ingredients from Ohio. The packaging was done in California, and then it was trucked back to initially my uncle's house in Connecticut. So because it was a truck with one of those lifts on the back for a pallet. It was one pallet of product, 50,000 sticks.
Dang. All one flavor.
All one flavor. Yeah.
What was the original flavor?
Lime. Wait, no. Yes, lime. But it had the color of lemon lime because it was supposed to be lemon lime. But there was the way that it tasted I didn't like. And with the formulator, we pulled the lemon flavor. And it was like, oh, this works now. So it was just lime, but it was like yellowy color. So anyway, I then threw like pizza parties at my WeWork and had a bunch of friends come and help me pack out all of the boxes. We shipped them using an old label printer to all the Indiegogo customers. And this was now, I guess, April of 2018. We then, I say we, it's the royal we. It was still just me at this point. I'm kind of trying to figure out how to grow the business. I was sort of going to bodegas in New York and be like, hey, can I put this on your counter? It's like Pedialyte, but for adults. And I was like putting sticky notes on the boxes on the counter and basically running like offline A/B tests. So I would put the packaging there and I would grab a sticky note and just write Pedialyte for adults. I didn't want to put it on the packaging because I figured that might cause some potential troubles for me.
Yeah.
So I just put a sticky note on there. When I did that, the pack was gone by next week when I would go back to refill them. But when I didn't, it barely moved.
Interesting. Wow.
Yeah. So the hangover use case in NYC bodegas definitely made sense. So I was doing nominal revenue through August of 2018. And to be honest, I think I didn't sort of journal or anything back at that time. But just from talking to friends who saw me at like weddings that summer, I was not in a good place. They were like, wow, you really were about to shut that thing down. But in August of 2018, I got reached out to on cold outreach on LinkedIn from this guy, Jae-Jung Kim. And being a skeptical Brit, I had a cold message from someone I didn't know, ignored it. And then the people who I'd done the marketing for the Indiegogo with email introduced me to the same guy. At which point now it's warm. I'm like, oh, okay, less skeptical. Let's chat. And he basically said, hey, I just started business school, but I'm really interested in this category. I think there's a huge opportunity here, and I like what you've built. I spoke to the ladies at the marketing firm. It's called Launchbot. And they said, you don't really have someone with my skill set, and like maybe we'd be a good fit. So this was one phone call. I remember I was at my parents' house in the UK that day, and we agreed, okay, when I get back to New York, we'll meet, come to my WeWork, we'll chat and see what happens. So very quickly, I think it was a period of about 3 weeks. We met, we chatted, we did reference checks on each other, and he dropped out a pen, took his tuition fees out and invested them in the business. And we came to an agreement on like ownership and everything that made both of us happy. And yeah, that was then like the first real capital we had to grow. And I think at that time, what I needed was that vote of confidence from someone else.
You think you probably would have shut it down?
I don't know. I think I was about to have to go and raise money, and I had no experience doing that. Didn't know what I remember having one conversation with a guy at a New York VC, and I was like just kind of out of my depth. Not in that like I couldn't comprehend the stuff. I just had no idea what I was doing. And then Jay got involved, and Jay came from this background of like McKinsey, distressed debt, private equity, like a bunch of very high pedigree firms, very finance oriented. And to him, it seemed to me like this was just the easiest thing he'd ever done. He was like, he'd snap his fingers, we'd have cash. I was like, wow, this is cool. So anyway, he invested this money. We immediately start running ads on Facebook to test our positioning and value props. And from that, we found that this positioning of sort of a daily hydration and wellness was really what resonated. With that data and with that kind of early sales traction we got, we went out and raised, I think at this point we would call it a seed round, largely from angel investors, much of it from Jay's network from business school and his previous career. People believed in Jay. They wanted to bet on him. Jay believed in this business, and they wanted to bet on what he believed in.
Interesting.
So next thing you know, we'd raised a bunch of money from angels. We then met with the Sixers Innovation Lab, which was an investment arm of the 76ers, the Philadelphia 76ers. And they more or less sort of matched the existing angel investments. And that was when things really started to feel more than real. And we started to like compound our growth.
So without going into total details associated with that, how does the business change when you take on these angel investors and this outside lab that invested in the business? Maybe just talk about like kind of the rough structure of how you have seen these deals come together, because I think most people are listening, they've never gone through that process, and they're going, all right, well, yeah, I want the money for sure. Give me the money. But what sort of comes along with that? What changes at the business? Is your equity now down? How does that functionally work for the company?
So yeah, you get diluted. So I own now less of the business.
Mm-hmm. And how does that affect you? Only affect you when the company ends up selling, or is it, hey, we made $1 million in profit, fake numbers, but now instead of owning 50, I own 40, so I only get $400,000. Like,
right? Yeah, it would shift if there was profit distributions. It would shift the amount of.
You're smiling like that is not the relevant thing in angel investing.
Exactly. The reason I'm smiling is like the irony of having taken all this capital is no one's thinking about that at that stage, or at least at this time. Now, currently, 2023, profitability is everything. But back then, and people in that sort of VC angel investing world are not thinking about getting distributions. They're thinking about an exit.
Yeah.
And so are we, So really what it means is, if I own 100% of the company and I sell it, I get 100% of the proceeds. If I own 40, I get 40%, just like you said. Mm-hmm. I think the more subtle shift that to me is more interesting to folks who are interested in taking money is it goes from you are not accountable to anyone but yourself to I have just taken hard-earned dollars of someone else. I am now accountable to these people. They're not my boss, but it's almost harder or worse than that. There is no, at least for me, I feel a real obligation to work my ass off to make sure that those dollars turn into more dollars at a minimum. And that shift, I think, on the one hand, it can be very galvanizing. It's like, okay, all right, now this is real. We got to go. We got to go grow and get some urgency going.
Yeah, they want you to go fast, right?
Totally, but also just like the mental pressure of having taken, like, someone believes in me, believes in this business. Wow, that's incredible. Like, I got to go prove them right. And that in itself creates urgency. I think at that stage, the angels don't drive urgency verbally. They're not the ones saying, hey, what are you doing? Like, grow faster. The institutional capital, so from the Sixers Innovation Lab, they invested, and the guy who runs that program is Seth Berger. He was the founder of And1. And he's a baller.
Did you watch the documentary?
I did.
Yeah.
I did. Yeah. So he's in it.
Great documentary.
Yeah. And Seth is an amazing guy. I would say initially, and I think he would agree with this, he and Jay hit it off very quickly. And they were like, bam, bam, like, here's all these things we can do and change. And I'm a little slower. I'm a little bit more breaks, a little bit more, I need to process internally before I speak, if you like.
Plus, this is kind of your baby, you know?
Yes.
You created the product. You started it all solo. You know, this is your thing. And now all these people are coming in and telling you, wait, you're going to do this and what and change this.
Totally. And the motivations are slightly different. Not necessarily the incentives, but the sort of the motivations are slightly different. So what I mean by that, Seth was an amazing mentor to both Jay and myself. He helped us figure out some things that we hadn't thought about in terms of what we were trying to get out of the business for ourselves. He helped us with like access to branding resources and stuff like that. We leveled up with his help for sure. I think one of the other things that was interesting at that time was he would push us to make bigger bets. And with 2020 hindsight, I think he was probably right. We should be playing to win, not playing not to lose, if that makes sense. If you play not to lose as a tiny company with barely any revenue,
right,
and you've taken capital, that's the wrong way to approach it. And again, the clear piece I have to point out here is if you've taken money and are trying to grow big and fast, yeah, you got to make big bets. If you're going the bootstrap route, different plan of action required there. But anyway, so yeah, we took that money and we used to drive down to the Sixers facility in Camden, New Jersey. It's like attached to the actual training complex for the Sixers, which is kind of cool. And we would like sit in sessions with Seth on a pretty much weekly basis.
Wow.
Yeah, it was great. It was a really interesting time. It's very exciting, and I think back fondly to those days.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit on something really important there about taking those big bets, especially if you're sort of I'm doing air quotes, small guy in the industry. Like, if you don't do something big and different, how are you ever going to like chip away at that behemoth, right? Like, and he probably knows that because he started And1 where there was Nike and all these big companies. And if they didn't do something different, if they just tried to grow like 1% per month, it's like you're never going to catch up to Nike doing it like that. You need to chunk off some like, boom, we just grabbed an extra 3% of the market by doing this And1 mixtape tour thing.
Exactly.
Yeah. And to your point, you know, even if you are bootstrapped, I still think you have to still think about like, what can we do to be different, you know? Because there's sort of a different playbook, right? That gets you from 0 to 10 million, that gets you from 10 million to 100 million, 100 million to like a billion, right? I just recently heard someone say, and I was like, wow, I think that's really interesting that you can make pretty good money going along with the crowd up to like 10, 20, maybe you can even make $50 million like following the crowd and doing what everyone else is doing, but just doing a good job with it. But if you want to make like $100 million, $250 million, $500 million, it's like you almost have to be a contrarian. You have to do something that everyone else is like, nah, don't do it that way. And that's really the only way to get to that, because if you're like following the line, well, there's only so much in terms of resources that's going to get you to that goal. And I was like, wow, that's a really fascinating insight that you have to be betting against it, what everyone else is betting on, and taking big bets. I think it's valuable whether you're a small business or you do have that capital.
Yeah. I guess the specific phrase was bet the company.
Bet the company.
And it was like, I think if you're bootstrapped, it's your baby in a different way, and you're not trying to prove it in a short period of time. But I think as a capital allocator, an investor is like, hey, I want to figure out if this thing that I'm betting on is going to work, and like let's sort of tune up the risk in these early days and just push really hard and see if it works or not. And if not, everyone moves on and you can do another business. And I didn't realize that at the time. My mentality was like, oh no, this is, I've been doing this for a year and a half already, which was a mistake.
A year and a half, right?
Yeah.
What are we, almost 10 years in both?
Yeah. But yeah, anyway, it was a different mental framework that I think was super helpful to me to experience at that time. And I still draw on it now as Hydrant's gone through these various different life cycle stages, and think wistfully of like, I wonder what it would have been like if we had made some like crazy calls back then. Could have been very different.
Yeah. Well, you have to think of it, if you're on the outside, as these investors look at it. They're going to invest in, let's keep the numbers simple, 10 companies, and they know probably 9 of them are going to fail. So that one has to pay for all of those 9 failures. So that one company can't like make, 20%, of the portfolio. It has to make like 100, 200, 1,000% gain, or else they're out of it. So yeah, if you're just one of those portfolio companies and you're like, we're consistently profitable, it's just like not good enough for them.
Right.
They have to have those moonshots. Looking back, what would you potentially have done differently in that 2017, 2018 timeframe if you could have?
So I think moved faster and launched quicker. But I think if you're asking the question, once I had met Seth and been put through that framework, what would I have done differently? I think zero sugar much sooner.
Yeah.
We could have been 2 years ahead of everyone else on the zero sugar thing.
Yeah.
In powder specifically. And now, the biggest player in the space has zero sugar.
But that was 2023 that happened.
Yeah. Yeah. So we could have had a real big lead there. And I think it's a shame that we didn't. I don't know that we necessarily knew at that point that zero sugar was a good idea. We ended up launching the caffeine energy SKU, which has been, it's a solid one. It's still going strong.
I'm drinking it right now, man. It's in the flask. Yeah, people love caffeine, and I heard you talk about where people can feel something with your product that kind of hooks you into that habit. And that's how it is with so many sports nutrition products. That's why pills are so hard to sell. Pills pay the bills in sports nutrition, but if look, you take a vitamin D and you're like, okay, I know I'm taking it, but you don't feel anything. It's just really hard to get your customers to come back. Meanwhile, pre-workout with beta-alanine, people are like, sick. I feel my face tingling. This is awesome. I love it.
It's so hard though as a scientist. Like I know that like the feedback loops work, but doesn't mean that the product is good for you. Doesn't mean that it's necessarily the right thing for you or for whatever goal you're trying to achieve in that moment. Mm-hmm. And I think, unfortunately, brands have to chase feedback loops that might not be ideal for consumers. They might be putting in, let's say, loads of beta-alanine. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with beta-alanine specifically, but that's just a very obvious one because of the tingly feeling.
Yep.
Maybe 10 years from now, we find out there's something going on with that ingredient specifically, and we shouldn't be loading up on it. Or
that it's just not really doing that much, like
Sure.
for your muscles.
Yeah.
Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I really don't know.
Yeah.
I know some people swear by it, but...
Yeah, I don't know. The thing about supplements that I beat this drum a lot is most supplement studies are not looking for negative effects. They're looking for positive effects or nothing. And so what you find on the consumer end is you'll only ever see studies being like, vitamin C is great for colds. We will never find out if vitamin C is harming people.
That's true.
At this point, that one's been around for long enough that I think there probably are studies on whether it has negative impact too. But the way the US sort of food and supplement system works is stuff comes to market very quickly, and it takes a while for it to go through the sort of regulatory processes that make it a little bit more, I don't want to use the word safe, but kind of tried and tested. And it takes years to get to the point where we've checked for negative effects of anything. So I come at this from a very conservative lens. I'm like, what is there where the science is absolutely solid and I can feel comfortable that people are going to get a product that really works and they're not going to be harmed in any way. Those are like, at a minimum, I think everyone should be trying to pursue that goal, right? Rather than putting other stuff out there.
Yeah. And it's funny because my friends that are in the sports nutrition side of things, they're just like, man, all the good ingredients are banned now for pre-workouts. Like I had a guy who literally was like, we're just not even going to make pre-workouts anymore because they're all the same. He's like, you can't put anything good in it anymore that like actually gives you an effect. So everybody's just like juicing the caffeine, 400, 450, 500. Right. And he's like, this isn't even fun or exciting. He's like, you put beta-alanine, citrulline, arginine, caffeine. He's like, that's every pre-workout now. I was like, that's an interesting take, that I haven't heard, because like 10 years ago, gosh, like I haven't been in the industry that long, but I've seen so many products or individual ingredients get banned. Like I'm like still young enough to remember like the old Jacked, like the 1,3-dimethyl, which is like essentially like almost meth. And then, I remember even just recently, like hygenamine got banned, hordenine has been banned. All these ingredients, picamillin has been banned. And it's just like every year they're like adding one more stimulant to the list of things that's been banned. I don't know. Are they really hurting people, John? You probably might have a different stance on it than me. I took them all, so I'm still here.
Yeah, I don't know those specific ones. I think I can see both sides. There's an element of if you rely so much on the scientific process, it's going to be really damn slow to do anything, and it's hard to be innovative if you wait to get like perfect data on everything. And I do see that side of it as well. I think the other piece though is claims and marketing claims, and if you're going to go the more innovative route, at least if you're not sure that it's, let's say, safe for consumption, at least tone down your marketing claims, or at least make sure that those are bulletproof. Like for the positives, we don't know if it's negative yet, but let's not overpromise on what the product can deliver. And that's another thing that I've really struggled with. I think coming from the European background and working in this industry in the States is like, it's a very different system. It's what do they call it? I forget the phrase. Checks and balances. So here, the way you find out you're screwing something up is either a demand letter, a cease and desist, or a lawsuit. Usually that's going to come before you hear from the FDA or the FTC. In most other countries that I've lived in, it's hoops you jump through first. And so I think consumer trust in products is higher. You don't get these sort of slightly shady websites that we get in the States where someone's selling, a new innovative thing with sort of questionable ingredients in them because it just never makes it to market. There's too many hoops to jump through. And again, same exact argument. Maybe that stifles innovation. I certainly think it does. We've had our own issues with one of the countries we've tried to sell in's health body, where they were so rigid in their definitions of a product. They said you are either an oral rehydration drink or you are a sports drink. You cannot be in the middle. And my point to them was, well, we're innovating, we're creating a new thing. Like neither of your definitions for these products fit our product. And they were like, nope, either you have to add sugar and be a sports drink, or you add sodium and be an oral health drink, oral rehydration solution. And we just bailed. I was like, I'm not doing either of those things. Like our formula is excellent. There's no change happening here. So we just didn't sell in that country.
Yeah, I'm also not the biggest fan of like the government getting involved and kind of trying to regulate all these things, just because I think I've seen so many instances where they're like banning N-acetylcysteine. It's like people have been taking this product for 50 years. It's like legitimately like predates like the FDA, and they're like, well, we're going to ban this now. People are like, what is this? What's going on? This is a vitamin I take every single day. Why? So yeah, I mean, I just, and Amazon has cracked down on that a lot, actually. So if you're selling on Amazon, you can't make basically any medicinal claims at all whatsoever. So like even on the Hydrant sleep product, you have to be cautious not to say like, aids in sleep, because they're like, well, what are you saying? Are you saying that you have like a medical condition where you're not able to sleep, like narcolepsy? Are you treating narcolepsy? Is that what you're saying you're doing, John? So you have to be like may help in sleeping, may cause, a calming effect, things like that. Even like calming, you can't say the word anxiety basically at all anymore on Amazon. If you say anxiety, because they deem anxiety to be a medical situation. So if you're saying like, we had a product that was actually called anxiety relief, I believe. And they're like, yeah, you can't sell this product. And we're like, no, but that's the name of the product. They're like, you can't, this cannot claim that it relieves anxiety, because anxiety is a medical condition which cannot be solved by anything unless it is a medical product. So vis-a-vis, you are claiming this is a medical product right here, which you're not allowed to sell a medical product on Amazon. It's like, oh my gosh, this is ridiculous. And that mostly stemmed from a big FDA letter that they got earlier in 2023.
Right.
They got an FDA letter that they were like, hey, there's all these listings where people are claiming these like cure diseases and stuff. They're making disease level claims. So Amazon's like, all right, we got to crack down on this because we don't want to get into the crosshairs of the FDA.
Yeah. Well, you won't be surprised to hear that I sleep well at night because I have an incredible regulatory lawyer.
Yeah, that's what you told me.
Not a single product goes out without a huge label review. And it's like I am legally risk averse on all of those things. Mm-hmm. And I've seen competitors do really well making claims that I know for a fact to be not true. And, I'm not going to name any names, but there are certain big brands in my industry who, after being bought by a huge multinational conglomerate, will remove said false claim from the packaging because their lawyers know, oh, this is a risk. This has to go immediately. And so, the claim, it has created an unfair playing field because I wasn't willing to take the risk of lying to customers. But, I spoke to my FDA guy. I was like, so what can I do? And he's like, there's not really anything you can do. Like, and even if something did happen, like they just have to take it off the packaging. That's it. And at that point I was like, all right, we're just going to continue playing the game the way we're playing it, and hope that someone else figures out that this is completely untrue.
Yeah. And the exact same thing happens for us with Amazon reviews. People want us to go in and like manufacture. How do we get reviews faster? And it's like, there is no way to get reviews faster. People have to buy your product and leave reviews.
Right.
They're like, well, but can't we have like people that we know buy it, or can't we like drive traffic to it, or can't we like get a company to do these reviews? I'm like, you are able to do all of those things, yes, but you are not legally allowed within the Amazon terms of service. So, sometimes I just think you got to kind of look at the risk to reward. We had a guy in here, Christian, and he's a trader. That's his profession, is he's a stock trader day by day. And he's always talking about like the risk versus reward. So that framework was really helpful for me to think about, okay, well, what's the risk? Well, the risk is that our whole Amazon account gets shut down. The risk is your whole business gets shut down. Well, what's the reward? Okay, the reward is like, I don't know, 5% extra sales, 10% extra sales, 20% extra sales. And that risk only compounds the more you do it or the longer you go on. So it's like, I've been making a false claim on my product for 5 years. It's like, okay, that risk is like getting higher now, especially also if you have success with it.
Right. Yeah.
So, that's a really helpful framework to run things through, is that risk reward. So we just tell our clients like, hey, look, it's our Amazon account. You don't want your product to get banned. I don't want my account to get banned. And everybody else that we do business with sure as hell doesn't want it all to get banned. So let's just do it the right way, And another quote that I heard that I really love is the slow way is the fast way. So it's like, hey, do it the right way. No, it's not going to like skip over a couple of steps, but if you do it the right way and you do it long enough, you're going to have success. And that's an interesting kind of business that you've been in with the venture capital side of things, because I think they sort of go like, well, the fast way is the fast way. Let's do it all. Come on. They don't want to break rules, but they do want you to go fast.
I mean, okay, so to tie back to what I said earlier about the science thing and being a scientist and whether that is an advantage or a disadvantage, I have not been making the decision purely around risk and reward, because to me, there's an integrity question. I view myself as a scientist, and I have read the exact paper that is referenced. Well, sort of not really referenced, but lightly. It's the one that false claim was based on. And
can you give us a hint what this is?
No, I can't.
Like, I don't even know. Like,
I don't want to touch this with
industry.
a very long.
All right.
But my ego is, I am a scientist. I know I'm not anymore, right? I'm running a business, but I will not like lie to customers about the science of my products. I will not make products that are bad. And those are the sort of rules that I live by. And I had pressure from VCs and generally from investors to make the same claim on our packaging. And I was like, I know for a fact there is no shot that this is true. There's just no way. And they're like, well, what if we like fudge it a little bit? Like, what if it? I was like, you could do that, but my sort of, I didn't say this to them at the time. I think dragged my feet on it a lot. They could have done it, but not with me at the business. I would have had to leave because that's how seriously I take the scientific integrity piece. And that over the years has been a thing that keeps popping up for me. I'm like, am I in the right business? As someone who's unwilling to view this as a risk reward thing from a regulatory standpoint, for me, it's like a scientific integrity question. It's like, can I, go on TV and defend this product and say, well, we made that claim because of these 10 studies. And that was how I designed the product, by the way. It was like, I spent way too much time in that 1 year of no output. I was building a database of every paper on hydration that existed and every like possible ingredient that could be in there. And that was why I knew, like, no, there's no way that's true. There's just no way. And I read the paper. It's not true. Anyway, we can move on from that. But it's interesting how the risk reward piece is super relevant. I love the framework, but on this one thing, I'm unable to look at it through that.
Well, I think that also it applies in that the risk you are taking is this could potentially be business ending. If it comes back that, hey, John and Hydrant have kind of been lying this whole time, or they've been making a claim and then someone comes after you. I know you and I have both dealt with unscrupulous lawyers that'll go after you. I just personally don't think that making those types of claims or incremental steps, even if they do speed things up a little bit, are worth it because, again, like this could blow your whole business up. And it's like, why would you take a risk that's going to potentially leave you out there exposed? And like you said, you sleep good at night, man.
Yeah.
Same with us. Like I sleep great thinking about our Amazon account because I'm like, I know we're doing everything right. Even if we like do get pulled down someday, it's like, well, that was an error on Amazon's side. Like that could happen. That for sure could happen. But we didn't do anything wrong, and I know that for a fact.
Sleeping well is underrated.
Yeah. If you don't sleep well, you could pick up a Hydrant sleep packet. Yeah. So I know you said, and I've heard you say this a couple of different times, that if you're not slightly embarrassed with your first product, you waited too long to launch. Where do you think Hydrant would be if you didn't wait maybe those additional months to launch the product?
I don't know. It's so hard to go back that many years and think it through. I think we probably would have come to the conclusion that we needed more flavors faster, which would have helped. I think if we'd started the business 2 years earlier, we'd be in a very different place today because it was a very nascent category growing super fast. The category is still growing a ton.
Yeah.
And
probably worldwide also.
Yeah, I think so. So it's a good place to play for sure. It still is, and we're still playing. But the sort of advantage some of those earlier players had, with exits to Nestle, Unilever. I'm sure there are others in there. There's a bunch of private equity ones as well. I think those had been around like way longer than we had, and kick myself that I didn't take the risk straight out of university and start a business. No, I didn't have the idea. So
that would have been like what year? Like 2014,
2014. Yeah. I mean, I would have had zero idea what I was doing, but to be honest, I like 2 years in the Bay Area working on a tech startup was helpful, but it wasn't directly related to what I was doing at Hydrant. So
yeah, talk to me about your time in Silicon Valley. I've never been. I've only heard about it as this like mythical place out there where startups have arisen and rode their way to billions and billions in valuation, and everybody's hip and smart and cutting edge, and everybody's getting coffee together. I mean, what is it actually like out there, and what did that experience teach you?
2014 was heady times in Silicon Valley.
Okay.
I think the companies that I think of are Dropbox, Uber, and Lyft, all kind of hitting their stride. I mean, I think they had hit their stride, but I had friends who were working at those companies enjoying insane perks, huge stock options. And I went out there as a non-technical kind of all-rounder. meaning I'm not a software engineer.
How did you even arrive on the idea of that you're going to go to Silicon Valley? Because you were in Oxford area, and then
Yeah. So I always knew that I wanted to start something. I also knew that America was a great place for that. My brother had moved to the States. He did university in the States, and he'd started a business. I knew that Silicon Valley was just like the right place to be. If all of the culture around startups was coming from there, filtering through the New York scene to the London scene eventually, I was like, obviously I should just go to the starting point.
Yeah.
There was a romantic element at the time. Didn't work out, but I was chasing someone, trying to make a relationship happen as well. Yeah, it didn't work out, but so that coupled with I had taken a job in the UK after university. I worked there for a few months, and I was sitting on a plane to Japan of all places to meet with this tiny little company that made nano bubble machines. We don't have to get in that. That's another tangent, but I realized like I am not in the right place. This isn't working for me. And I, as soon as I landed, opened up Hacker News, which is Y Combinator's forum site. And it just so happened that day I landed from the flight and had made the decision, like, I'm out, I'm going to California. They posted a job. The company I ended up working at was a company called Quartzy. They made software tools for scientists. And it said, we want a scientist with people skills, basically. It was like kind of an entry-level role, tiny company. I think I was employee number 9. And I immediately applied, had the interviews, was like, great, this is happening, quit my job, moved to California, had some interesting early living situations. So they were based in Palo Alto, which is sort of like Stanford is there. It's kind of the center on some level. Mountain View and Menlo Park are also pretty central. But anyway, I initially landed, had nowhere to live. So I went to...
Great planning, love it.
Yep. Went to Airbnb and found a sort of, you could call it a hostel of sorts. It was a house somewhere in Palo Alto. There were, I want to get the numbers right here. I think it was 16 beds and 3 bathrooms. That was a swimming pool though.
It's like a dorm.
It was like a dorm. It was horrible. And that was a 2-week rental. So I did that. While I was there, I then hopped on Craigslist, found an ad for like a hacker house. And it was this guy, Chad, who, of course, now is a founder, along with basically every other person who was in that building.
It's cool. It's a good house then.
I met Chad on University Avenue, handed him a check for whatever, like first month, last month, and security deposit was. And I had a spot secured in the nascent hacker house. We called it the tech house. There were 12 guys.
That's also a lot.
We had
Was it a big house?
It was a big house. We had a pool. We had...
This is honestly the plot from Silicon Valley,
the
TV series.
I lived it. I'm not even kidding. Like, I lived it. I was the only guy who was not an engineer. And so I'm sort of a second-class citizen, both at the company I worked at, but also in the tech house. Like, these are guys who had graduated university that summer and were like working at Yahoo and all these other companies, making really good salaries. And I was sort of like a third of the salary was what I was making. I got lowballed on the way over, and I had no leverage. That was fine. I was like just so happy to get over there and
get in.
Yeah, just get a foot in the door. So I had a bunk roommate and a bunch of other friends, and my commute was 5 minutes on a bike. It was perfect and fun. Just being with all these like instant friends. So that was cool. Eventually, I was like, I need to be in a city. This is not quite right for me. I didn't have a car. So I moved to San Francisco and would then have an hour and a half commute to Quartzy. But yeah, Quartzy was tools, unsexy tools for scientists, lab management tools. It's now kind of like Amazon for scientists on some level, I think is how they would describe it. I think they've become like quite a large business. So, power to them. Love it. It was an amazing formative experience. I remember in the early days, the CEO at the time just like dropped a MySQL book on my desk like a week into the job. I was like, hey, you should probably learn this. I think it'll be useful. And so I did. And oh my gosh, the power of data it blew me away. So I have the bug. I'm like a little bit dangerous at technical things, but I'm absolutely not a software engineer.
Well, MySQL, what is that?
It's a database language. So, it's not coding, to be clear. It's a sort of step between people who have zero technical know-how and people who can code. Usually the code interacts with the database. And if you can write queries to the database, you can get insights from data.
I see.
And so because I was a very cheap employee compared to the engineers, once I was good at SQL, anyone on the non-technical team who had a query question would come through me. And I would write the query. And if I couldn't, I'd go to the engineers and be, hey, can you help me with my logic here? Turns out a lot of the engineers were like, no, I don't really do SQL. I write this other kind of code. You figure it out. But there was an amazing data scientist there who taught me his ways, and he was very helpful. So, but yeah, the power of data, basically I became more important, powerful within the company because I was running all these queries for people, which meant I knew what was going on with the business, with the true sort of happenings under the hood, because I was running questions on real-time data. So it was an amazing experience. Wouldn't trade it for anything. Towards the end, I was an arrogant young fella who wanted to be a product manager, which was the sort of cool job for a non-technical person at the time. And I think the founders there were like, this guy's full of himself. We're not going to make him the product manager. We're going to hire someone from outside, which I now know was absolutely the right call. But I was like, okay, I'm gonna go build something myself and learn a little bit faster.
You're probably 24 at that point in time.
Yeah, somewhere around there, 24, 25.
We knew it all back then,
Yeah.
So you told me that while you did leave that business, you did take a little cross-country hiatus, right?
Yes. Yeah. So the mistake I made was I didn't have a car when I was in San Francisco. And I now know I should have, because the whole point of being there in my mind is access to nature, whether that's the ocean, the mountains, skiing. It's incredible. And I didn't have a car, so that all passed me by. So 6 months before I left my job, I was like, okay, I know I'm going to leave. I'm going to buy a car. I'm going to tint the windows. It's got to be a wagon. It's got to be cheap, all-wheel drive, so I can take it in the snow. And I have to be able to sleep in the back of it. So fun story was buying a car on Craigslist. I pull up to this parking lot, and the guy has the wagon in question there, and I just jump in the back. I was like, he's like, oh, you want to take it for a drive? I'm like, no, just put the seats down in the back, the middle row, just put those down. So he puts them down, and I jump in the back. I'm like, do I fit? If yes, okay.
John's a tall guy.
If not, doesn't work. So that was another major criterion. Basically, I tinted the back windows, limo tint level, very hard to see through, and set up a kind of bed situation in the back. I mean, it was rudimentary. I used the soundproofing in the studio. I had recorded the instructional videos for Quartzy, and they blessed me with some of the triangular foam.
You were the only British guy with an accent there.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Right. Makes sense.
So I layered that up, and that was my mattress. I got a roof box on the car. I basically packed up my apartment, put everything in the car, and bought an epic pass, and just went skiing from Tahoe to Utah to Colorado. Sadly, on day 6, I cracked my calcaneus or calcaneus. I'm not sure how we pronounce it here.
Yep.
And yeah, I was medicating a lot on that drive across country so that I could keep skiing. I knew what the prognosis was. It was going to be stop skiing. Yeah. And I just quit my job to ski.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely not. So I was on a lot of ibuprofen to make sure that I could keep going. And by the time I got to, I think it was Beaver Creek, I did one day of skiing there, and I was kind of in tears on a chairlift with a stranger because the pain had gotten to a point where it was too much. So I called it and went to a doctor, and of course, they x-rayed it and was like, yeah, you need to stop skiing. I was like,
yeah.
Okay.
That's hilarious, man. Well, John, let's take a quick break. We'll hit the bathroom, then we'll circle back here in a second.
Okay.
So we were just talking about you guys raised money 2 more times after this kind of initial angel investment and this lab fund.
2 priced rounds. There were other, various fundraising things, different vehicles. No, different financial instruments. That's the correct terminology.
I see.
Yeah.
And I definitely want to hear about that fundraising process, what that looks like, because I know a lot of people on here listening, I'm sure they've never raised money. Maybe they never even dreamed of raising money. Maybe they have an idea. They're like, oh, well, that'd be great if somebody gave me some money for that idea. obviously very difficult to have your idea come to that. But maybe just talk about the difference between growing your business, because we grew our business. Like, we've never taken any outside funding. We have no debt in our company. Me and Austin put in about $1,000 each, and we kind of bought inventory, re-up, sold that, kept it going, boom, 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 boom. So now any given time we have maybe $4 or $5 million in inventory. That all started with that $1,000. So it's kind of crazy, you know. But that took us 9 years also. So like, you know,
that's so cool to hear that.
Yeah, appreciate that. But you obviously just a different model where you kind of took that funding. So I can tell you our story, you can tell me your story, and they're just going to be different. But maybe compare and contrast now based on what you understand about that, what it looks like to bootstrap versus kind of take that money and have that venture-backed business.
So thinking about a few different ways to approach this, I think the timing of us raising money, and you couldn't have known this then, or at least I couldn't have. I was very ignorant to this, of the sort of the cyclical nature of the market. But the timing was this sort of very low interest rate environment. A lot of capital was in these venture funds who needed to deploy it. CPG was ripping. Generally, the category was doing really well. CPG is consumer packaged goods, for those that don't know the abbreviation. And, you know, the category was growing. And so, you know, I think I realized when I was in that phase pre-Jay joining the business, you know, we were doing nominal revenue. And, you know, maybe I could have gotten to the point where I sold through that inventory, made enough to then, you know, where I wasn't putting a salary. You know, it was 2 years of no salary. So, but it was a long road, and I don't think I knew what I was doing on marketing, nor how I would have, you know, figured it out without some cash to play with. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we raised, and I think there was a lot of money looking for a home, a way to, like, you know, generate more money. And that made it easier. Now that I've been through the venture cycle, I think it can be a great tool for growing a business. I think that as first-time founders, there was a lot that we had to learn that we didn't know yet, and we made a ton of mistakes. And many of them I look at with the benefit of hindsight. I'm like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe we did that, because you're optimizing for growth. You're not building, or at least you are not necessarily incentivized or even told by your board or investors to build a healthy business. They expect you to burn cash. They expect you to do that in sort of service of growth. And in doing so, you can build a really big business that's not actually very healthy. You know, the phrase is buying revenue. You can buy revenue. You know, for every dollar in of marketing spend, how much revenue out are you getting? A good business, you're, you know, getting a few bucks back. A bad business, you're getting one or less dollars of revenue.
I think people would be shocked to find out how many businesses that they know and love are engaged in that cycle, and they're not making money, not profitable.
Totally, yeah. I mean, and so for us, like, our business is subscription based, right? So the model is get people to come back more than once, and all consumable products, you know, are in that game. Arguably, all businesses on some level, and the sort of numbers game is how much do I pay to acquire a customer, and then how quickly can I repay myself for acquiring them. So we talk about payback period. If I spend $1 and on that first purchase, the return on that dollar is 70 cents, how long until I get over $1 of revenue from that customer? And we played that game. You know, we raised money, we put money into the machine. At the time, Facebook and Google were the main sources of customers for us, you know, digital marketing. And we were pretty concentrated in those, which was a risk. You know, we knew that. Our investors knew that. And we pushed really hard on those and did not build a healthy business. We built fast. We were growing really well. Then the market shifted. And I don't mean the hydration market. I mean the capital market. Suddenly, people didn't want to invest in growth of a unhealthy business that's burning a lot of cash.
What year approximately did you see that shift start?
So the shift really started in 2021. arguably we made some other big mistakes in our business that meant that we were ahead of the curve. This is not a curve you want to be ahead of, but we were ahead of the curve because of some mistakes we'd made going too big into retail too fast. And so we were kind of on the back foot already and had to make some hard decisions around the business, cut the team size, cut down our number of SKUs that were out there. And that was not a quick process. It took a lot of time to unwind some of the sort of, in software, we would call it technical debt. When you grow fast, you like layer loads of systems very quickly together. No one is thinking about building like a healthy system underneath, or at least if they are, they're always playing catch up because you're growing so quickly. And we were tripling the business every year. So it was like an insane journey. Team size was growing really rapidly as well. And so when we eventually cut down the team size, it took, honestly, we're still now to this day. And, I think that first layoff was over 2 years ago now. No, that's not true. Yeah, maybe it is true. Over 2 years ago.
We're almost into 2024, man. It's nuts.
Yeah, it's crazy. We are still finding sort of like deep systems that we didn't even know about, that, or softwares that were being paid for that we didn't know about, or processes that have like died because I killed a software, and now like we're not, remitting some payment to a specific vendor the correct way, and we're in arrears to them, or whatever it is. It's like there's so much stuff that passes you by, and yeah, just an entirely different environment. So I feel like I've lost the original question.
Just bootstrap versus, having that VC funding idea. And it sounds like what you're talking about is sort of rewiring your brain, but also the brain of the business to like, hey, we're not just going to grow and sell now, which is what the VCs want, right?
Well, I think at some point we wanted that too. And that's
everybody does, right?
Yeah. I didn't get into it for that, to be clear. But at some point along the journey, we were propositioned by some bigger businesses, and the numbers were silly. And I'm kind of looking at this like, there's no way this is real. Like, no one, this business is not worth that much money. And the day, it was a weekend. I remember I was on a trip in Vermont with some friends, and my head was in the clouds. I was like, I do not know what planet this is, because like my life might be about to change drastically if this thing is real. Mm-hmm. Spoiler alert, was not real. But that day, and the kind of the excitement in the category, there were people being acquired around us, meant that I think for Jay and I operating the business, we were tired. We'd been grinding for what I now realize is not that long compared to most entrepreneurs' journeys, but it felt exhausting. And the idea that we could step back and at least like have this pressure release valve of an exit felt incredible. And so we made what I think is a huge mistake and started solving for short-term wins that look really good on paper and drive some of your sort of near-term metrics, but don't necessarily result in a long-term healthy business. And some of those are chasing retail revenue from retailer. One of the things I didn't know, and it was stupidly naive of me not to, is with some retailers, most retailers, when you go in and you sell them product, you have not truly sold that product. That product, if it does not sell off their shelf, you're buying it back from them, sometimes with a fee on top. And that is death for a company. It is just the worst possible situation you can be in. We've been through it. I know a lot of other folks have too. But the retailer is taking no risk on you.
Right.
Like they have an opportunity cost of putting a different brand in, but they can just charge you back for the money. And that is the sort of thing where now that I know that, I'm like, I cannot believe that we went so big so fast at retail, because we didn't know what we didn't know. We made all these mistakes. But so to go back to this bootstrapping versus raising option, I think the reality is my approach is now you got to build a healthy business. You've got to at least know where you will eventually be a real business. I think building to sell is a dangerous proposition. And everyone involved, board, investors, employees need to be aligned that like, we all know this is risky and there may not be an outcome, because if you build to sell, one day the music stops. And, if I were to do it all over again, not Hydrant, let's say, years from now, I start another business.
Mm-hmm.
I think I will spend a lot of time figuring out product market fit. We kind of touched on it earlier with this whole idea of who is that target audience that you're trying to serve, and going really tight and deep within that group before taking any outside money. I'm not like anti raising money. I think there's times where it can be incredibly beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
But I meet folks like yourself who've bootstrapped, completely control their own destiny and the destiny of their business because they did it, in my opinion, the hard way. And I'm just like, man, that would be cool. Because, over time, as you raise more money, the controls rightfully get stronger. You get a board, you have various sort of shareholder votes, board votes, veto rights. There's all kinds of different terminology that you have to learn. And the person who teaches you is the most expensive teacher you will ever have. It's your lawyer, who probably costs $1,000 an hour.
Mm-hmm.
If you're raising VC money and they're telling you to work with one of the big firms, which they will. And, in some cases it's the right thing to do. They're great lawyers, but it's a very expensive way to learn the like most important things that will happen on your company journey.
Mm. Yeah. And I think one of the things that you said there made me think of this quote is that when the metric becomes the thing that you are chasing, it no longer is a valuable metric. It's something along those lines. And it sounded like to me, you eventually went, oh, the thing we're chasing is a high valuation, but that high valuation wasn't necessarily a good metric for the actual function and flow of the business. It led the business and you to probably make some decisions that were not the best thing long-term for the business. And probably there were people doing the same thing that did end up squeaking out the other side, but not to say that was luck, but it was the right time, the right place, the right product, right thing. And there's so many of those, right? That it's just like that was the right product at the right time with the right group of people behind it. And that's why it's the one that we know about.
Right.
There was a grocery delivery company like 15 years ago that was way before like Instacart or any of these businesses that didn't work because they just weren't there at the right point in time.
Right.
And yeah, maybe if they would have lived out that more healthy life cycle and gotten to now, they'd be the company that we all know about.
Yeah, I think very possibly. I also think the founders of that first, I think it was Webvan was the original one. I don't know what they went on to do, but I bet if we were like...
I bet they were okay.
Yeah, I bet they're okay. And that's the other thing is if you raise money and it doesn't work out, you can get trapped in some pretty weird situations. Like I've had some stuff.
Oh, really?
Well, it's just like you read a lot about zombie companies right now. Everyone's talking about it on Twitter where you've raised a bunch of money, but like you aren't profitable and there isn't a next round coming because VCs aren't investing right now, or at least like the criteria have changed materially.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no strategic exit available for you. And so for the folks involved, it's like, well, what do we do? We're sitting on, in some cases, the folks who raised just before, and this wasn't us, but the people who raised big rounds just before the market turned, some of them are sitting on millions of dollars of cash, like tens of millions of dollars, and their business model doesn't work. And the valuation they raised, that was massive. And there's this fear of the down round, right? Which is where you raise money at a lower valuation than the last round. Because, in the press, it's going to look terrible. But the reality is like for some of them, that's the future. It's shutting it down. It's like merging with another company. It's definitely difficult. And the number of stakeholders you have to deal with when you raise money versus when you bootstrap is just way higher. So I have like 100 and something people on my cap table. And all of those people, they can email me anytime and I'm likely to respond in some fashion.
Right.
And anything bad that happens, I feel awful. I feel like I'm letting everyone down. Now, obviously, bad things happen in a bootstrap business still weighs very heavy, not to, put that down in any way. I think the journey will be mentally a little bit, I think I would experience it in a better way without having to be accountable to all these other folks in the picture.
That's interesting because to me, maybe I'm just saying this because I haven't been there, but it's like, hey man, you knew there was risk going into this business. Like you're an investor, Like if I buy Amazon stock, I'm not pissed at Anthony Jassy when the business doesn't do well. I'm like, well, I bought the stock. It's on me.
I've heard that take before, and I think you're 100% right, and I think I probably over-index on trying to like do the right thing and trying to not that your approach is not doing the right thing. You're right.
I'm going to do the best thing for, I think, the business. I think that's what I always tell everyone. Like,
right.
I don't prioritize any one individual. I prioritize the business. So what's best for the business may not be best for you, and it may not be best for me either. Like, that means that maybe I have to do some stuff that I don't want to do, but it's best for the business. And I feel like that's always my responsibility, not to any one individual.
Right. I think at some point, though, like the question that will cross people's mind is, so I have only one thing that I'm truly accountable to, that is shareholder value. I have a fiduciary duty to my shareholders, and that word comes up a lot when things get dicey. And it's honestly like kind of depressing because it just makes you, it feels so impersonal, the whole thing. I'm like, I have a whole team to think about here, but the word fiduciary duty keeps coming up, and a lot of founders around now are going to be experiencing this. And at some point along that road, you're like, well, hang on. I have a duty to shareholders, but I am my own person. I'm living my own life. And at some point, I need to do what's right for me. And that's not in the context of the company. It's like, that could be deciding a different path for yourself. And, that's not the path I'm on. I'm still at Hydrant, still running it. But my co-founder stepped away. He had some personal things in his life and decided it was best to move on. And so, yeah, it's just like those are the sorts of decisions that are a little bit harder when you take money, I think. It's harder to sort of wrap things up because you have people who have invested in you, believed in you. And I don't take that lightly. But I also hear your point. Angel investing is probably the riskiest asset class. You should know what, if you're investing, it means you're legally a sophisticated investor or whatever that phrase is.
$1 million net worth.
Yeah.
Like that.
Then you should know what you're getting into. So I hear you on that point too.
I'm with you, but at the same time, you obviously want to give it everything you got because hopefully you can build long-lasting relationships with these people, right? And a phrase that I love and I say all the time is that individual entrepreneurial efforts often fail, but over the course of a career, an individual entrepreneur rarely fails. Meaning, like, if you're just, hey, I'm just going to keep going, like, whatever, mix doesn't work out, like, all right, I'm going to keep going. I mean, you see me experimenting with weird stuff out here just in our kitchen. Like, yeah. I got a whole phone full of notes I got like 70 business ideas. I'm a huge believer in if you have a business idea, pull your phone out, write it down on the notepad. I don't care if you're like, this is a stupid idea. Like, I had like an idea like, oh, a cigar subscription. I'm like, that probably exists. I'm going to write it down though. Like, just because then you thumb back through someday and you're like, oh, okay, that's interesting. Maybe this one isn't it, but I have 70 different, product ideas in there, business ideas. And I think just helping to train your mind that, hey, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm not this. I'm not mixed. I'm not Hydrant. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm going to give it all that I got right now. But like you said, it doesn't have to be for the rest of your life. People don't do this thing for 50 years anymore. Like, that's a very rare path. No. And I think that if you can learn some lessons as you're building this thing and maybe make some money along the way, hell yeah, man, that's a success in my book.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I still have a ton of energy, both for this business and for like this path generally. I think it's super fun building things. Would I change the way I do it if I go again? When I go again? Because I will. Yeah, I'd do it differently for sure. And kind of like tapping back into that phrase you shared about the entrepreneur, like in one business versus across their lifetime. My friend Ben has this concept of a lifetime bet. And he's just like, oh, I've got a lifetime bet on you, John. Or I've got a lifetime bet on you, Zach. And we do, like a group of friends and I who've met along this journey, have invested like very small checks into each other's companies. There are all these like ways you can do that now with AngelList. And, we're betting on the person. And it is a lifetime bet. I know, this next business that one friend works on, it might not be the one. and I am comfortable losing that very small check. I don't like. It's not a meaningful sum of money. It's really just like I support you, and my bet is on in their lifetime. I know this person is going to crush on some level, and I'm going to be along for the ride in some way on every single one of those bets if they'll continue having me, because I believe in them so strongly. So I love that phrase, the idea that you shared. Like I believe in it wholeheartedly, and there are a number of people who I have lifetime bets on. I'm just like, this person for sure is going big.
Yeah, and to your point, about just starting the business early and not kind of waiting around until the product is perfect. The sooner you do that, the sooner you figure out either this product works or doesn't work. And, we don't have bankruptcy jail anymore. Like, you're probably not going to end up in the streets. Most people we know have friends and family that they're like, oh, things aren't working. Come sleep on my couch, man. Whatever. Like, the downside of your business failing is almost exclusively more in your head than it is in reality. You are afraid that everyone's going to think that John's dumb. He doesn't know how to run a business. That idea was terrible. Of course, I knew that wasn't going to work out, but generally just nobody actually cares. There's like, what? I don't know. Haven't talked to John in a long time. Don't know what he's up to,
Right.
Yeah, I think I went to the school with that guy, People don't care about what you're doing generally, which, initially when I started the company, like that really frustrated me because I thought people would care about like me starting this business. It was the coolest thing I thought anyone had ever done that they'd started a business. I was 22, started this business, posted about it on Facebook. Nobody cared. Like no likes, like puppy pictures are getting 200 times the interaction that I'm getting. And I'm like, well, I don't understand. Like I'm doing something like meaningful. I'm doing something important and nobody cares. But now as I've gotten older, that's just more liberating. I'm like, nobody cares what you're doing. So like, whatever, you want to start a podcast, do it. People probably won't even notice, like most of the people that are going to end up being your fans are going to be people you don't know. And then maybe somewhere along the lines, they'll be like, oh, holy crap. Like I know that guy who started that podcast. That's amazing. Wow.
Right.
What a small world. But they're not going to care about it. It's not going to affect their day-to-day lives, and they're not going to lose any sleep over what you're doing. So just go for it, man. Be excited about what you're doing, and if you believe in it, like you said, if you have that conviction, go for it. Because generally, I feel like if you have a conviction and excitement about it, you're already on the path to success. If you don't have conviction for it, you're not excited about it, man, that's a hard path to just pull yourself along down.
Totally, yeah. The downside risk element is something that is calculated wrong by everyone. And I mean, I think that maybe also is part of the whole American culture being attractive to someone who wants to be entrepreneurial. There's a lot less stigma here around failure in whatever context that may be. But you learn so much when you start a company. Like it is a fire hose of learning. And that means your risk taken is just the opportunity cost of earnings in that time and any capital that you put into the business. But you're going to learn more faster than you ever before in any W-2. And that is super valuable. And, I haven't gone back out in the job market since I started Hydrant. It's been a long journey.
I always wonder, like, what job could I get, if I went out there?
Right. Well, I spoke to a founder recently who said, he in his business had some chats with recruiters and just, he wanted to like put a finger in the air and see where the wind was blowing. And he was like, it's honestly not bad out there, man. Like the jobs are awesome. GM roles. A lot of people are looking for people who like have some scars, some battle scars from being in the trenches, or in the arena, I should say, as everyone's saying now.
The man in the arena, yeah.
Yeah. The thing that I find important and that I perhaps have been struggling with in this sort of slowdown of funding, slowdown of the market more broadly is I'm in this for learning. There was an early exercise we did with the guy from the 76ers, which was like, what are you trying to get out of this business? It was like, write a number on the board, write the things you want. And I was just like so lost in that exercise. I didn't have a number that I was looking to make from the business. Honestly, I was like, this seems fun. I'm solving a problem and like I'm learning a bunch really fast. And now the team's much smaller again. I'm doing a lot of the stuff that I did, 5 years ago, which is a humbling experience. But what I challenge myself to do every day is find like a new edge for learning, because that's really what keeps me excited and curious and interested in my day-to-day job. And got to find those ways to stay learning, because as soon as you stop learning things, you're going to get bored. You're going to start looking around and thinking, well, is there a ton of financial upside here? What is my opportunity cost of being here? How do I continue to learn? But as long as you can find a way to keep learning, maybe that's how do I get AI into my business? Or maybe it's something else. But that to me is what makes the journey fulfilling and de-risks it too. As long as you're like not just plodding along doing the same thing you were 5 years ago, you're in good shape.
Yeah, we mentioned Tim Ferriss earlier today, but I think he has a quote somewhere along the lines of, the worst thing that can happen isn't abject failure. The worst thing that could happen is you live a life of drudgery, doing a 9 to 5 that you hate. And it's like, wow, I mean, that's a good point, that the failure kind of risk calculation, you don't factor what it's like to just live a normal life. And to your point about learning lessons, that's difficult as you get to running your business, because you're like, man, I got to run the business. Like I can't slow down to learn things, or I can't slow down to maybe do something that isn't immediately productive today. Like I got to be productive today. And, I find that for us that we have, 100 different things to work on every single day. And I have to work on all the business related things. I work on brands. I work on, the technical thing. So sometimes it's hard to slow down and be like, wait, we're not the same business we were 3 years ago. Like we're 10 times the size of that. So this phrase that I love, what got us to where we are now is not going to get us to where we're going. And those skills that you needed from like 0 to like 30 million of like being scrappy and hustling and like doing it and being like maniacal and doing everything yourself, those are the absolute wrong skills to take you to like 60, 75, 80 million, because you need to be able to outsource and you need to like stop trying to do things the cheap way. Like you need to be professional now. You need to start like putting those controls in place that you talked about, whether that be financially or in terms of risk, in terms of, the brands and how you manage your employees and things like that. So, we're just trying to navigate those ourselves and figure out what we do to keep learning to grow to that next level. So, John, I just got kind of one more question for you, man. I know you've talked about being interested in other areas, business, energy, tech. Where do you see yourself going, if Hydrant gets to the ultimate place where you feel like you've done what you can with it?
So I think the science thing I'm not done with in some capacity.
The science is solved, John.
Yeah. Well, in some, not with hydration. I don't think I'd do hydration again.
Yeah.
I think the intersection of, if I were to stay in consumer goods in some capacity, somehow playing between consumer education around science and brands, like I like that space. I don't know what that looks like as a business today. What I think I would love to be involved with, but have no qualifications for, nor necessarily an entry point, is like this intersection between aerospace and sustainability. So there are some really exciting companies out there building the transport of the future that you can see being funded today. No one knows about. It's like, how have people not heard about this and been really excited? So my go-to answer for this one is Region Craft. It's this company in Rhode Island that makes they call it a sea glider. I think it's legally a boat that has wings. It flies only within one wingspan of the water.
Interesting.
Which gives it like this boost in lift. Anyway, the point being, I'm super excited about that sort of technological development. I have no idea what value I can bring to those companies at this point, but I think in terms of long-term learning and fulfillment, being involved in some business that contribute something you can measure, not just in dollars, also in impact. Ideally, sort of sustainability impact it's an area that I'm interested in. So I'd love to work in that space.
I think an area where you and I both know there's a lot of opportunity is that sustainable packaging world.
Yeah.
Man, like that's just such a hard problem. It feels like right now is how you solve that, because like you've talked to me, you're like, I'd love to have the hydrant packets in a sustainable package, but there's not really an option right now at the current moment in time.
Yeah, that would be an interesting problem to solve. I don't know. Yeah, I could do that.
There
Maybe.
you go. There's your intro into like CPG
I'll let you
and
know.
sustainability. Yeah, man. I'll be on the doorstep to invest in that, man. John, where can people find you? Where can people check out Hydrant? Where can people buy Hydrant? And just kind of keep up with everything you got going on.
So drinkhydrant.com, or you can find us on Amazon, of course. We are also in Kroger and HEB in Texas. I'm not going to give you the full list. Find us on our website or on Amazon. That's the place. Me, I'm pretty under the radar online. I would say I am on Twitter. I don't post. I'm on Instagram. I don't post. I am on LinkedIn and I occasionally post, but it's just about hydrant stuff. So maybe LinkedIn is the best spot. You can find me there. And I promise to respond if you reference the podcast.
Yeah, sweet, man. John, dude, I appreciate you so much, man. I'm so happy to have you on here.
Cool. Thanks for having me, man.
Heck yeah.